Hello,
Oh,
everyone. Welcome back to the Breakout podcast. We have not done one in a while, but we're back. I have today the usual Mr. Ethan Dubovsky, Akira Ernesti, and Adam Albers. But you
glad to
may
be back,
also
Jacob.
notice you
sir.
may notice someone quite familiar. Amu, welcome back.
Amu,
Yes,
welcome.
sir.
Thank you guys. Thank you for
Welcome
having me.
back.
So we want to wish you happy birthday. Your birthday was yesterday.
Thank you.
Yeah, and yeah, so you recently changed schools. We heard you moved. So, we wanted to talk to you. What's that been like? What have you gotten up to recently? Yeah, we haven't talked to you in a while.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I did move. I moved from San Bruno down to Menlo Park.
Oh,
So that was
wow.
quite the distance done. And so we've just been getting adjusted to this new community. But I've still been really involved with San Bruno politics as we're in the middle of an election right now. And so I'm
Yeah,
traveling back and forth up there to help out with the campaigns as I'm still
really?
trying to get adjusted down here. Yeah.
Really? So you're helping who with campaigns?
Yes, so in San Bruno, I'm part of the staff on the Linda Mason campaign, Stephen Seymour, and Tom Hamilton campaign. Those
Wow.
are two running for city council, and then one is also running for mayor in San Bruno.
Wait, how are you helping two people both running for city council? Aren't they opposed?
So no, actually, so in San Bruno, there was a shift in the way sort of the way the campaigns were run. Last year, we ran this a very similar system where we had these two candidates running actually in a coalition, right? Although they aren't on the same like ideas, or although they're not precisely right having the same ideas and the same supporters, their ideas are similar enough that it is worth it to work together when it comes to campaigning, so walking door to door, right, when it comes to holding events together. And the goal of it is if you have two people putting their energy into one whole effort, ideally those people will win, right, at a higher rate than if they did individually as separate teams. And so when
Yeah.
you allow for both people to mix together, have their supporters and people who are trying to meet them, right, know to have one central place and one central, I think, meeting place when it comes to any events, it makes it really easy for the community to meet these candidates, and then hopefully it allows for those two candidates to make it on the city council together.
Wow.
Okay.
That's super interesting. Yeah. Um, So, this show, the topic will be a bit different than some of our other shows in the past. With the recent Black Lives Matter movement going on in the United States, we wanted to talk to some people about, racism and anti-racism. I couldn't really think of anyone better than Mr. Amu. He's always been a massive advocate against racism and things like that. So, we wanted to, talk to you, ask you a couple questions, and yeah, hear your responses. So, um, first question: have you, or can you think of an experience where you personally been affected by racism, and what was like that? What was that like?
Yeah, absolutely. About 2 years ago, I was in the downtown area of Millbrae, and I had two police officers show up to me and ask for my identification, and I asked them why. And these officers justified as there was a suspicious person of color, and more specifically, a black man that had been called in by someone in the police. And when I asked them, well, how was this person described? So someone was described as wearing a red hoodie, being about 6'5", and being around 40 years old. They stopped me at the
Wow.
age of 15,
Huh?
and this is a great example of how when you have such, I think, unspecific definitions of people who are called into law enforcement or called into a local police station, you allow for biases, right? These police have to then, I think, really harass any person who happens to belong to this race group, right, or to this ethnic group. And so
Yeah.
that's just one clear example of, I think, racism in action, but then also it's an example of how embedded it is in our society and also in
Hmm.
our culture.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. I know obviously everyone knows you're from Uganda. You grew up there. Um, could you talk about, or have you experienced racism in Uganda, and how is that different from racism here?
Great question. So Uganda is a country made up of different kingdoms. When the British
Yeah.
came to Uganda, right, they drew these imaginary borderlines of this country that happened to intersect a whole different groups of people and made them into one country, one identity. And so in Uganda, race is not the I think the distinctive identity that people are known as. It's more of their tribal allegiance and more their regional allegiance, right? So my people in Uganda, the Karamojong, come from the northeastern part of Uganda. And so the tensions there are, it's more of a regional and tribal cultural, I think, division in Uganda. And so there, my people are a minority, and they're also horribly dehumanized and really are oppressed there. One great example was when I was in grade school, right? So I was in about I think it was second grade. I had the headmaster, the principal of my school, describe me as a very gifted and very unlike his people who were like cockroaches. It is this, I know it really does get you to turn and look back and say, what was that? So in Uganda, although it's not on race, the same problems and the same oppression still continues there. It just has a different, I would say, just a different paint over it.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's super interesting. Another question. So obviously you talked about your experience two years ago. But I'm sure, have you witnessed a racism towards another person, whether that be in school, in a job, in just in life? Can you share some
Yeah,
experiences about
no,
that?
absolutely. I know just even most recently, I was at work and I had a colleague of mine say a remark about somebody's ethnicity that was really offensive. And
Really?
this person knew what they were saying because they said, oh, luckily the person is not there. And so this is just an example, I think, of why this time in our history and also in our nation is so important is we have the opportunity to recognize the systems in place and also recognize that we have the solutions. I think the challenging aspect of this whole movement going on right now is, do we have the will, right? And I think
Yeah.
people going on the streets, people contacting their local representatives are showing that the will is there. But I do think there has to be more collective will, but also I think the will is come from people who belong to dominant groups. And that means people of European descent in this country, right? People who are wealthier
Yeah.
in this country, right? People who are able in this country. I think we need to all fight together, but I think we need those who can fight a little more to do so, right? Because
Yeah.
we cannot rely on people of color or people who've been historically oppressed to always lead these movements. We need people who have the privilege, who have the time, who have the resources to take charge and recognize that when they lead these movements and participate in it equally, they benefit from it equally as well as everybody else does.
Yeah, the people that have more power need to lead by example, and hopefully people will
Absolutely.
follow. Right. So, we've been discussing certain racist events, but the topic of this is about anti-racism. So, I hope you call yourself an anti-racist, and what does
I do.
anti-racism mean to you?
Absolutely. So anti-racism has a very specific definition. And actually, I wrote it down because I really want to make the point very clear. So an anti-racist is a person who implicitly or explicitly suggests that all groups of people are equal to one another, regardless of race, right? And the anti-part in anti-racism is going against what the definition of racism is. And to define racism, I try to define a racist idea. And a racist idea is one that implicitly or explicitly suggests that any group of people are inferior or superior to another group of people on the basis of race, right? So to be anti-racist, you don't only, I think you don't only say that racism is horrible for our society, that it is a systemic problem. You also go to the next step and you say that no, all people are equal. And that's truly where being anti-racist, I think, is really so important in this movement is you are coming to understand that anti-racism is one of the many solutions to go against racism, but also it is a solution for humanity, right? It allows you to see
Yeah.
people as equal, to see your neighbor as equal to you and deserving of the same rights as you do.
Yeah, you're not just saying racism is bad, but you're actively going out of your way to show that it's bad and that you don't stand for it, right?
Yeah, and that also racism, it just doesn't exist. Race is a human construct, and we as humans can break it down, and that's one of the powers of anti-racism.
Yeah.
I just had a question. I feel like racism has obviously been in the world, but really in America, it's been like an ongoing discussion since our country's birth. But I really feel like an alarm of sorts went off this year recently. I feel like just the wave of just police brutality really was put in the spotlight. And I just want to know, because I feel like our country sort of wept as one, like there was a rise of activism that we haven't seen in a while. And I was just wondering how you genuinely felt. What was your perspective going through all this? I mean,
absolutely. There, give me a second. Sorry about that. Absolutely. I think I look at this moment in our country with an outside perspective, right? As you guys mentioned earlier, I was born in Uganda and I lived there for 9 years. So I bring a lot of my, I think, perspective and also a lot of my beliefs. Being a person of an out from a different country, coming in and looking, I think, from sort of a bird's eye view and seeing that although this country is now recognizing it, I think as a greater collective, this is not new. But although that is true, it is really important to, I think, recognize the importance of what's going on right now, right? We're seeing today, I think, a large number of people from dominant groups and from those who've historically benefited from oppression, I think coming together to recognize that the time is now to address systemic racism in our institutions, in our society, the nation as abroad. But also, I think recognizing that for so long as we keep on perpetuating this system, it will keep on hurting all of us equally, right? I think it's why I always tell people the oppressor is also as much oppressed as people that they oppress, right? I think that's really important to recognize, is that racism doesn't just affect those, right, who are supposed to be the inferior group, but also I think it also affects those who perpetuate and that create these systems.
Yeah. Wow. So, what do you hope comes out of this current BLM movement?
I think with the more national, and I think also local, my hopes and goals are that we all, I think, start to recognize the importance of truth and reconciliation. We as a nation had a period of reconstruction, but that period sadly did not last long enough, did not accomplish enough things, or actually was not sustained, right? The ideas and goals that were brought up in reconstruction in this country were not sustained today, and we see that. I think hopefully we come out of this and recognize that it is time to have an honest reflection on our history, but also it's time to recognize that we need to put our attachments, our fears aside and try to actually address racism with solutions that have proven to work previously, right? We have the solutions in place because we are not the only country that has dealt with racism or that has dealt with oppression, right? And so the solutions do exist. I think this moment in our history, I think it can show us, hopefully, that we can come together and work on solving racism together so that we all can live a better future and also hopefully have a better nation for our children to inhabit.
Yeah, perfect. So do you have any advice or instructions for people who, are against racism, but kind of want to become an anti-racist and really benefit this movement? What are some of your thoughts and what do you think people can do? What do you think people can do better?
Absolutely. I think the first and important thing is when you are trying to begin a journey of being an anti-racist, you need to, I think, recognize what racism is, right? And that can be through talking to your friends, but that also can be through your own independent research. I think for too long, we expect people of color, people who have been historically oppressed, to be that explanation, right? To be that research. But I think to empower ourselves, we need to do it ourselves and try to, I think, take those steps, right? Take those active steps of reading, of listening to news and media about this. And then the next step that's really crucial in this is we need to recognize that being an anti-racist is a lifelong journey, right? It doesn't just begin today and end with a black square, right? You have to, I think, progressively adopt the ideas of equality, and also adopt the ideas that we need this in our country. I think if we do so, right, if you do look at this as a lifelong journey, I think you allow yourselves to make mistakes, to grow, but also to eventually, I think, be a better person. And so that's a really challenge here, is we need to recognize that just because you support an idea today, right, and what you have heard of it today is what it is, doesn't mean that it'll always be that for you, right? Your personal experiences, who you talk to, what you listen to, right, will all affect who you are and the ideas that you have. And I think that's really why it's important for all of us to come together and have these discussions. Is it allows for a broader context to be built, but also for ideas to be spread.
Yeah, it's not going to happen overnight. You have to be committed and try to work towards
I have a question for you. So I know I think you're an optimistic person, but I want a legitimate answer. Do you think that I guess do you think that end wait, well, I'm echoing. Okay. Do you think that ending racism is like something that is actually possible? I mean, I'd like to say in this nation, but I really don't see that happening soon. But just in general, then, do you think there will be a time when we don't have these kind of conflicts?
I think what's important is look at it, I think, from a historical perspective. We as a people and as a species have to be optimistic, right? To be able to endure what we have done, to be where we are today, we have to be hopeful, and I am hopeful. I think as I work with local politics and meeting my community and talking to my neighbors, it gives me a lot of hope, because I think at the federal level, it might be disconnected, right? We might even be a little, I think, wary of what's going on at the federal level. But I think when we come locally together, I think there is a lot of hope. And so I do believe we as a nation have the tools and resources, and I think eventually can get the will to start to make broad changes into our institutions and also the way our society functions today. And so I am hopeful. I do believe that there will be a time, right, when everybody, right, can have equal opportunity. I think that's really what's important, equal access. I think, as Martin Luther King said, right, the arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice, right? And I think that's what we're living in right now. Is we're getting that bend, we're in that bend, right? It's not saying that we're at the end of that bend, but I think we're coming to it, and or maybe even going through it right now. And so that, I think, looking at it from a perspective does give me hope, and I hope it gives you guys hope as well.
Certainly, yeah.
Akira, do you want to talk about anything? Any questions, Adam?
Not any questions, but I'd like to add on to what you said, Amu. Like, adding on to Ethan's question, like how he said, do you think racism will end? In my opinion, like, I would say that, like, we will get to a point where a majority of people will be like anti-racist, I guess. But at the same time, like, it's still a problem now how, like Amu said, not everyone's educated and not everyone has, I don't know how to describe it. Like, for us D-Tech people, I would say we had Miss Frost's brother come and talk about his experiences with racism. So we were super lucky for that. But then if you think about other people, I would say that they're not all going to have the opportunity to have someone explain to them their experiences with racism. So not everyone, what I'm trying to say is not everyone is going to have like a general idea on what racism actually is because they haven't experienced it or may not have the motivation to go and educate themselves about it, if that makes sense.
No, yeah, I want to add out to that a little bit. I think it is really important as well to think of racism as racist policies, right? There's been for a long time this belief that racism is caused by fear and ignorance. But actually, that's not true. Racism is caused by racist policies, and those racist policies then cause that fear and ignorance. And I think if we have anti-racist policies, right, policies that really explicitly, right, work to make sure that we all are treated as equal and that we all have equal access and opportunities, I think that will allow people who have historically not been given opportunities to, I think, have people, friends who are from different backgrounds, right, have this knowledge of anti-racism, I think they will have it because it'll be embedded in our systems, right? It will be just like we learn about the Holocaust. Hopefully, in the future, we will learn about America's history of racism in the same context as this is part of our history. We can't deny it, but it's really important, right, to the solution of problems in this country, right? By understanding our history the way we understand the Holocaust, right, we are able, right, to create systems and policies that do not oppress people on the basis of their religious and ethnic identities, right, but instead understand that we are a complex people, right, who all, right, are I think not only entitled, but I think who all are deserving, right, of equality, right, of dignity, right, and of a life with liberty and the pursuit of happiness. And I think that's why these policies are so important, is they then don't need somebody like Ms. Frost brother to directly, right, come and tell the story.
Exactly.
That helps, but it's embedded in our systems, right? Everybody has access to that. And those who get more, you know what, it can't hurt, right? But everybody gets at least part of it, right? Everybody has that opportunity to understand the importance of anti-racism.
Yeah. Like you said, Amu, I think, like you said, it's important to learn from our past mistakes and educate the newer generation in these problems now, just so the generations won't have these type of problems. And it's like you said, embedded in their system on how it's not okay to be racist, and people should be trying to make a change of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Racist policies. So I wanted to ask, do you still believe systemic racism exists in this country? You're muted, by the way.
You're muted.
I'm sorry. It's not a belief, it's a fact. Systemic racist policies are ingrained in our systems. It's why we know that African Americans are disproportionately affected, right, by coronavirus, right? Disproportionately affected by income inequality, right? These two, I think, just like we understand that gravity is not an opinion, it's a fact, we need to look at racism as the exact same way, right? And I think for a long time we haven't, as I think in large numbers, right, or in specific communities that have the power to really cause change. And I think this is a more broader problem of a lot of us not wanting to recognize systems for what they are, right? We see right now in California, as we're going through these horrific wildfires, right, and having days where we can't go outside, right? For a long time, people have believed, right? People have the opinion that climate change is not real. But I think we no longer, looking at what we're living through, right, and the broader, I think, context of climate change, say that it is just a belief, right? That it is just maybe a coincidence, right? It is a fact, right? And if you want to come and see it live happen, please come to California, right? Come and experience what we're going through. But you can also go down to the south, right, and experience these hurricanes are coming through in record numbers and in record, I think, sizes, and causing record damage to these communities. I think in that same way, we need to look at, I think, racism in the same light of it is no longer, right, an opinion. It is a fact, and to experience it, we can just go to our own backyards, right? We can go talk to our friends. We can go see what has historically happened in our communities. And that will be evidence for us to recognize that it can no longer be an opinion, but it's a fact that racism is embedded in our country, in our systems, and in our institutions.
I think we've been very fortunate that DTech has gone out of their way and really tried to educate their student base on some of these topics. I think it's helped a lot of students who, originally weren't educated on this topic and didn't really know what to think and what was going on, really. And I think educating like Akira said, educating the younger generation will probably help to create a better future. Right?
Absolutely. I want to go ahead.
I was going to ask, with what's going on right now, do you think coronavirus has highlighted a lot of racism too? Because I've read about like how it's like African Americans and other people haven't had as much access to healthcare as other groups of people.
No, I absolutely. I don't have the exact data, but I can, in a way, sort of paraphrase what is evident. I think we see that African American businesses, right, are being affected
Yeah.
at rates far greater than those owned by any other ethnic or racial group in this country, right? We also see that African Americans are actually, of all demographics being affected by coronavirus, actually have the highest rates of death, right? Have the highest rates of complications, and also the highest rates of, I think, belonging to groups with pre-existing conditions, right? And this is an effect of slavery. This is an effect of genocide. This is an effect of racist policies and institutions. And I think to not recognize this is to really, I think, not only be ignorant or different to what's going on, but also I think it's to lose your own humanity. I think when you don't recognize people are in suffering, I think you lose the power that you have to, I think, understand suffering. And I challenge all of us to really try to watch what's going on, right? Try to talk to our neighbors, try to read about what's going on. Because the more we read, the more we watch, I think the more empathetic we get, right, about what's going on. And that empathy is what's key to this broader, I think, understanding of anti-racism, right? It allows you to see everybody as equal, allows you to see everybody as deserving of the same rights and of the same, I think, privileges as part of this country has had for really a historic time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Jacob, what do you think?
It says, looks like he's talking, but I can't hear him. It says you're unmuted, but I just can't hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, still not working.
No.
Hello?
Oh yeah,
Oh, now it's
no.
working.
No,
Yeah,
no.
Nick's gone. Keeps
I
going in
think
and out.
unless
Okay.
I don't know, Jacob, do you have any more questions? Anyone?
No.
All right. So Amu, any last thoughts about racism, anti-racism? Any advice for anyone who, like Jacob said earlier, is trying to figure out what to do, how to do it, what are the solutions?
Yeah, no, I think as we're living right now, the most important thing we can all have is to recognize that we don't all have the solutions individually, but when we come together, we can combine our ideas, our beliefs, our solutions. I think come up with better ones, right? That teamwork aspect, right? Or coming together as a nation. I think this current movement is going to allow or give us the opportunity for us to come together, right? Put aside our differences and truly come together, recognize that we are being given this time, this opportunity to, I think, work together, try to solve these problems that have historically been said were too big to solve, right? They were too expensive, right? They were going to require too much time, right? And I think during a pandemic, we have the time. I think we have the resources, and now I think we have the energy to do so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
I want to ask a couple of you guys. Have you guys been discussing this with your families? What have you been hearing from your own communities? I think since all of us come from different backgrounds and are in different areas within the state of California, what have you guys been hearing? How have you been feeling as we're living through this really important moment in our country?
Well, my dad at his work, they've been beginning to do like twice a year. They're starting to help a whole bunch of African American like organizations and stuff. So they've been like translating old texts and like stuff like that so newer generations can read it and understand it. And they've also been trying to actively work with like help funding, I guess, smaller businesses and just helping them out because they're struggling because of coronavirus and all of that too as well.
Absolutely.
Who else?
Jacob, you can go first.
Hello?
Hello.
All right, Akira, you go.
Hello, can
Okay.
you hear me?
Oh, yeah,
now.
We can hear you.
So, one of my dad's friends actually has a PhD in racial relations, and he recently quit his job and started a nonprofit that works with larger companies to educate the higher ups on how to create a more anti-racist and inclusive environment. Um, and he's doing great work so far. He recently started it, and he's working with some pretty big businesses.
Wonderful.
No?
For me, I would say like in general, my dad's like pretty well educated on like all the problems going on right now. But then like in Pacifica, a lot of people. Do you guys hear the echo?
Yeah, Jacob. I think
I
it's
think-
I muted him.
Okay.
okay. All right.
What was it? Oh, right. Okay. So in Pacifica, lots of people I would say are kind of careless, if that makes sense. Like, so I would say they don't. I feel like Pacifica compared to other areas are not as well educated in the things going around or things going on around them. And so I think that definitely affects like the attitude people have towards like all these problems going on. So for example, there's like a lot of people in Pacifica I would definitely say are racist. And so I try my best to educate them in like what's going on. But like at the same time, just one person telling like all these people being racist won't make much of a difference. So,
Mhm.
I try my best. So, yeah.
Well, I think it's that trying. I think it can
Yeah.
make it different. It is, I think, it requires a lot more energy. But what you're doing is really important. I think it's why I encourage all of you, I think, after we leave this meeting, to try to have these conversations. And the audience that watches this, it is really important that you don't have to have a PhD, right, in racial relations to understand this. But I think to be human, right, is to recognize human suffering. And I think to recognize human suffering, I think compels us to try to work to address it. And so I ask of all of us to just, I think, talk to our community, talk to our friends, talk to our loved ones, right, and try to start these conversations. Because with these conversations, I think real change can occur.
Yeah, definitely agree with that.
Great.
Ethan?
Yeah. What?
I was just going to ask, what have you been experiencing through this time?
Right.
How has this been going?
I really just think there was an overwhelming shock that we've all experienced during the pandemic. But I've reflected on this a bit. So my mom is from Georgia, which traditionally has, the South traditionally has these, racist roots. There's no really way around that. And my dad is from South Africa, and he's white. And South Africa was a very racist country up until like even the 90s, right? Apartheid. And so both my parents are obviously very anti-racist, and they've raised me well in that regard. But the fact remains that they both grew up around these conditions that their places of origin promoted this idea of or at least maybe not even promoted, but just let it happen. We're complicit at the very minimum. I would say they probably did promote it, but and I think coming now to this, we have to recognize that it may not be as prevalent there as it is, or here as it is there. It still exists, and we have to just address that and approach that accordingly. And I think Amu offers a lot of good solutions. I think the first step is, admitting that this is a thing. You have to recognize that it exists, and then you have to look at what can I do as a person. And so you say, like Amu, that example that you gave of you, with the police officers, that's disturbing. The fact that this happens in our community, and I feel like a lot of people would choose to forget that or recognize that it doesn't happen. And so, first step is that, and then like you got to just do your part. That differs to each person. Like what can I say for how Amu approaches this issue? I can't, right? I can only address it as myself. We should really stop speaking on the behalf of other people and get all kinds of representation. Like Amu says, policies are really what matters. And so we need people from all walks of life, all perspectives to approach this issue, come together, and figure out a solution. So I've just been, a lot of reflecting is what I've been doing this whole time.
Yeah, no, I think that's wonderful. And I think speaking of that policies, we are in an election, right? And we got to get the elephant in the room. We have a president who is currently having the coronavirus. And this is, I think, causing a sort of an awakening of our institutions. And I think anybody who is watching this, if you can vote, if you are over 18, please register to vote. There still is time. And the way in this country that we change policies is through voting, right? We change them through representatives, and take the time to understand the issues that are going on, the people on these ballots, and recognize that your vote does matter as much as anybody else's, right? And by you not voting, you don't only, right, allow for racism to continue, but I think you prevent, right, anti-racism from being continued. You prevent, I think, this moment in our nation, I think, to I think have the potential that it does, right? So voting is really important. And I think you're absolutely right, reflection. That's another key thing. And I think we can do both of those. We can vote and reflect, right? But we really must get those first-time voters, right? Those who don't always vote, to really recognize that now is the time, and the time will always be the time, right? They will always have the opportunity. As long as you can vote, you must vote. It is your civic duty. And it's in this country that I think we represent our ideas and express our beliefs, right? So everybody, make sure you go vote. Go look up your county, right? Their voting policies. You can, in California, right, register on the same day, vote the same day. We're very fortunate to have that system in place. Tell your relatives, right? Tell your loved ones, tell your neighbor, right? Make sure you are voting, because that is really going to be, for this election, really crucial in choosing the path of our nation and choosing representatives who will get to choose those policies, right, that really make a difference. So voting is really essential, but I think you're absolutely right. After we do vote, before we vote, we gotta have a reflection on what is going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, we're about to run out of time on the Zoom. I wanted to thank you for coming on, Amu.
Thank you, Amu.
Thank you.
Have you on again.
Yeah, great talking to you. We wish you luck at your new school.
Yeah, and then speaking of voting, a year less than 364 days, and then you can vote, Amu.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, no, guys, thank you for having me on. It was a great pleasure to be here. Always love to see the crew coming together to talk about difficult topics, but important topics, guys. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Again.
Awesome, guys. You stay safe and healthy.
Yes, you too.
Well. Okay. Absolutely. And go vote. Go vote. Absolutely.
I will.
See you guys later.
I will.
Bye-bye.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah.